Caracas, August 2025. Venezuela is shifting onto a war footing. The government has announced a sweeping military deployment along the Colombian border and the Caribbean coast, in what officials are calling one of the largest operations in recent years. The move comes amid escalating tensions with Washington, rising accusations of drug trafficking, and a renewed push by President Nicolás Maduro to frame Venezuela as a defender of sovereignty against foreign interference. At the center of this surge is Operation Katumbo Lightning, a massive military initiative personally outlined by Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez. According to Padrino Lopez, the plan is designed to crush cartels and armed groups that operate along Venezuela's western and northern peripheries. Vladimir Padrino Lopez said, "We are carrying out a full deployment with 15,000 troops, helicopters, surveillance, reconnaissance, drones and warships across our border and territorial waters, and we will prevail." The scale is unprecedented: 15,000 troops, 60 rapid response units, a fleet of drones, reconnaissance helicopters, river patrols, and Navy warships positioned across 851 kilometers of frontier. Officials argue that this robust posture is not only about border defense, but also about confronting international narratives that Venezuela is incapable of securing its own territory. Beyond the military maneuvers, what startled observers was the sheer civilian response. In less than 24 hours, tens of thousands of Venezuelans poured into enlistment centers. Recruitment stations in Caracas and other major cities were overwhelmed by crowds seeking to join the Bolivarian militia. Authorities highlight that the militia is being expanded across factories, workplaces and neighborhoods, a strategy aimed at embedding defense structures into daily civilian life. The government claims this outpouring demonstrates overwhelming national unity. President Nicolás Maduro declared, "Dozens of thousands of ordinary Venezuelans said, 'I am ready.' This is national unity in defense of sovereignty and a rejection of those who dream of bombing our country." According to Caracas, more than 80% of the population rejects calls for US intervention or foreign bombing campaigns. By bringing volunteers into the fold of the militia, the government seeks both symbolic and practical reinforcement of its sovereignty narrative. But Maduro's defiance does not stop at mobilization. The Venezuelan president has turned his sharpest criticism toward Washington, particularly on drug policy. The United States has repeatedly accused Venezuela of serving as a major trafficking route for Colombian cocaine. Maduro's rebuttal is fierce. Nicolás Maduro argued Colombia has 7 US military bases, yet cocaine production has tripled around them. The real drug mafias are in the United States, and they know it well. He insisted Venezuela has neither cocoa plantations nor cocaine production facilities. He further emphasized that only a small fraction, around 5%, of Colombia's cocaine ever crosses Venezuelan territory. Instead, Maduro shifted the blame onto US financial institutions and criminal networks, accusing them of running the true global narcotics trade. The strategy is clear. By rejecting Washington's narrative, Maduro seeks to portray Venezuela as a victim of geopolitical scapegoating, not a perpetrator of trafficking. Maduro's rhetoric also zeroed in on Venezuela's domestic opposition. For years, opposition leaders have called for international pressure on the government, including sanctions and, at times, foreign intervention. For Maduro, this is a red line. Nicolás Maduro stated, "It is treason." What would happen if US opposition leaders asked foreign powers to bomb Washington? The people would rise to defend their homeland. That is exactly what Venezuelans are doing now. In framing the opposition's appeals as betrayal, Maduro positioned himself as the voice of patriotic defense. The analogy he drew to US politics, daring Americans to imagine their own opposition calling for an invasion, was designed to both discredit domestic rivals and challenge Washington's moral high ground. Yet Maduro is not only speaking about Venezuela. His rhetoric places the country's struggle within a broader ideological battlefield. Nicolás Maduro proclaimed, "We are at a turning point. The American empire is collapsing and the new world of the South is rising. Venezuela is once again at the forefront." This positioning resonates with Maduro's long-standing commitment to a multipolar world order, one in which Venezuela sees itself as heir to the 19th century independence struggles led by figures like Simón Bolívar. By connecting today's confrontation with historical resistance to empire, Maduro attempts to elevate Venezuela's role as a standard-bearer for the global South. Meanwhile, the backdrop of US military presence in the Caribbean remains impossible to ignore. American warships, Marines and surveillance aircraft continue to patrol waters near Venezuela, officially under anti-narcotics mandates. For Caracas, however, these deployments symbolize aggression and preparation for intervention. Nicolás Maduro vowed, "No one will touch this land." The confrontation thus stretches beyond drug policy disputes into an existential battle of sovereignty versus intervention. With Venezuela's deployment of troops and militias, the government insists it is ready to match US pressure with resolve. The Venezuelan leadership has repeatedly drawn parallels between today's situation and the wars of independence 200 years ago. Then Bolívar and his allies fought Spanish colonial power. Today, Maduro claims Venezuela faces a modern empire in decline. This narrative taps into deep nationalist sentiment, appealing both to historical pride and contemporary grievances about US sanctions and political pressure. While many analysts view Maduro's framing as an effort to rally domestic support in the face of economic hardships, the mobilization of troops and militias also reflects real concerns about instability along the Colombian border, a region plagued by decades of cartel violence, guerrilla warfare, and refugee flows. Operation Katumbo Lightning is thus more than a military exercise, it is a gamble. Deploying such massive forces along a tense frontier risks provoking incidents, particularly if Colombian or US forces interpret Venezuela's actions as confrontational. Yet for Maduro, the gamble is essential. By mobilizing tens of thousands of troops and civilians, by denouncing both Washington and his own opposition, and by anchoring his rhetoric in global struggles, he seeks to portray himself not as an embattled autocrat, but as a wartime leader defending sovereignty. The Venezuelan president's strategy hinges on projecting both strength and legitimacy. The footage of crowded enlistment centers, of militias forming inside factories, and of warships patrolling the Caribbean sends a carefully crafted message: Venezuela will not bow to pressure. On the ground, the atmosphere is charged. For ordinary Venezuelans, the sight of helicopters, drones, and patrols has become part of daily life in border regions. While some citizens express pride in joining the militia, others worry about the escalation. Economic hardships, shortages, and international isolation remain pressing realities for the population, even as the government pushes its sovereignty narrative. Nevertheless, the scenes of enlistment reflect a powerful emotional current. For many, the act of volunteering is not only about defending territory, but also about reclaiming dignity in the face of foreign accusations and intervention threats. The unfolding developments place Venezuela at a critical crossroads. Operation Katumbo Lightning is simultaneously a demonstration of force, a nationalist mobilization, and a rhetorical challenge to Washington's dominance. Maduro's defiant words, his denunciation of drug accusations, his labeling of opposition as traitors, and his framing of Venezuela as a vanguard of the global South all weave into a narrative of resistance. What remains uncertain is how long this strategy can hold. Military deployments are costly, and Venezuela's economy remains strained under sanctions and structural collapse. Yet, for now, the images of troops marching, militias forming, and citizens enlisting project a unified front. As Maduro himself declared with fiery finality, no one will touch this land.